welcome to Resourceful Humans. I am your host, Corey Haber, and I have two very, very knowledgeable and experienced HR professionals with me today, both HR directors, and they're going to be here to give us their opinions and kind of tips on how to use HR as an engine of change in your organization, which I think is very important now, and a lot of things have changed, especially with that virtual remote environment. So thank you, Alan and Ken, for coming on today. It's so great to have you.
Great to be here. Great to be here, Corey. I'm looking so forward to talking about this.
Me too. I'm ready to hear what you guys have to say. So let's just get started. So go ahead and tell us, when it comes to organizational change, where does HR fit in there?
Well, first of all, in terms of organizational change, like any organization, the most important and most valuable asset in an organization is people. That's kind of the textbook answer you say, and it's true. So the change has to come from within its people. So the conduit between the objective of the business and the employees is human resources. That's the human. You have to have people to communicate and and to actually as the way be the machines per se of an organization. So if there's a change in which the direction of the company is going, it's in order for that to adjust when the company decides to pivot, first of all, HR needs to have a seat at the table to help guide that. Sometimes what sounds great in a boardroom or from a consultant's report doesn't quite add up to what will materialize. So from what I've seen and what my experience is, you have to, in terms of what do we have to work with in terms of staffing? Are they trained properly? A big one is morale there. Are people apt for it? Are they ready for it? If they're not buying in, it's not going to happen. Or if it does happen, it's going to be pretty brutal and rigid in that pivot point. And that role is also that to help to move that big picture that the organization from up top is putting down from the big picture to the everyday needs. So it's kind of folks that are looking for it, or they're working on their trees to understand, look, there's a forest here, and that you need to. That's we're trying to all move towards.
Yeah, Alan, I couldn't agree more. I think another big piece of it is communicating the why. Why are you doing it now? Why do we have a need to do it? That's just such a huge part of it. And I know HR has a really big role in that. And they, the way I look, when it comes to organizational change, I think HR has a lot of responsibility when it comes to it, but it's not responsible solely for it. And I think that's a big piece, is that, your operational department, your behind the scenes departments, things like that. They're all a part of it. And what makes it even a little bit more difficult for the HR folks is that not only are your HR leaders sort of responsible maybe for overseeing the change, like sort of being like the project manager of the change initiative. They also have to manage their part of the change initiative within their own department. So it's almost like they got dual responsibility.
Yeah, that's true.
HR has to do more than just and he's right. It can't be, they're not the sole focal point of the change. And that is often a misconception that we're going to have a new campaign in terms of an internal process or a new system or new management, or we were purchased and bought. And so, it's not just HR prints of a bunch of marketing swag, stress balls and t-shirts and lanyards and passes them all out and says, all right, now we're on board and the train's rolling. And that's a misconception that often used to help get people for the why. The why is, this is great, it's wonderful. And one thing I want to add is, one thing I think it's important is when there is a change like that, there's fear involved in terms of people, the insecurity. How is this going to affect me? And especially in terms of technology integration and things of that sort, which I think the pandemic has really, helped people realize in some cases, not most folks, especially, in this day and time, technology is not your enemy, but you do have some that have the same processes they've done forever. They are relied upon. They are rewarded and receive compliments for what they do. And since, things have basically been turned on their head, the world's still spinning. The sun still comes up. The company's still working. And I think in the end, this has been good for businesses to have to forcefully work from home, the ones that are able to.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a long-term solution? Probably not. But I think more of a hybrid is definitely there for change. Because, the old adage of some of the work-life balance, and you always hear there's no such thing as work-life balance. I think this is the closest thing we've got to that recently. But that's a whole other conversation, and probably a whole series of podcasts you could have on that. But I mean, what I was circle back around was, we also have to communicate that, yes, this is going to be difficult sometimes. There will be setbacks. We'll have to probably pivot and change directions. And that's where the buy-in and also, being that morale and showing that proverbial slack, that, we are making it, the company organization is making a change in direction, whatever process or mean that may be. And there will be hiccups. And it's important that you communicate with your managers and with HR to find those hiccups, because the best people any organization has to look at are your frontline people. Some of the best processes, the best process improvement comes from the bottom, because they're dealing with it. And more times than not, the other ones doing contingency plans and making it work without anybody above them knowing anything about it. They're just trying to hit their goal. And so, acknowledging and owning the fact that this is going to be a bumpy process, no matter how much money we spent on consulting, how much, money we spent on marketing materials and jingles and all this stuff. We're going to have some bumps, and we want, and it's important for HR to communicate, and to also to work with those managers to communicate to their people, like, look, we're in this together. There is a long game here, and what you do is important. And I think, and then from my experience, that does help to acknowledge that. There's a phrase called acknowledge the suck, or own the suck, or something to it that this stinks, and it's important. So and acknowledge that, and I think that does rest assured many folks to recognize that that it's going to be a bumpy road, but in the end it will smooth out.
I think a lot, like one of the, if there are any positives that comes along with this public health emergency, I think it has shown a lot of organizations that they have the ability to change and pivot like rather quickly, because they've had to do it. I think, if you're looking at because I think when you talk about fear, I think it's, there is some kind of fear in the organization. Like, do we have the ability to do this? And I think this pandemic has shown that many organizations have the ability to do this when push comes to shove. For example, like a healthcare organization, many of them were able to ramp up really quickly when it comes to telehealth and things like that. And actually in partnership or in tandem with insurance companies and government, like, getting reimbursement for telehealth visits and things like that. And we've never really seen, I don't think we've ever even seen a situation like this before. Except, like when you talk about, like, in World War II wartime and ramping up, the military industrial complex and things like that. So, like, everybody working together. Really, this is another, one thing that this pandemic has shown is that we are able to pivot and ramp up rather quickly when forced to undertake significant change really quickly.
Telehealth has been huge. Where I'm located in the southeast region of the United States, in the central Mississippi's northeast Louisiana area, rural area. Access to rural health care is, for better or worse, but I live close in the Jackson area, so I have access to very good health care. But you go about 50 miles, you cross the river to the Louisiana Delta, it's rural hospitals. And it's, early on, if you folks are having to drive, get access to good health care, driving 30, 40 miles to go to to the closest city or town, to a regional hospital or something like that. And during the early part of the pandemic, and just if there's any type of symptoms, that run can, they're familiar with the cold and the flu and things of that sort. What do we want to drive all the way to the nearest town where there is a regional hospital or a clinic or the rural healthcare where up until a couple months ago, we're still having to wait 2 weeks to get the COVID results instead of getting the rapid. That's now it's moved through. And if they're working, you're out for 2 weeks until you find out anything. And so what's really pushed along is the telehealth is now, I implemented that with the organization I'm with this past year, mainly because I'm in the transportation business and our customers are on the road or on the water for periods of time. And it makes sense. And it's been wildly successful. With this coming into play, it has definitely paid dividends for us, and it's rolled in with our insurer. So it's been a very positive thing in terms of using that technology. It's forcing people to get used to the technology they have, because the investment was already there. It had to be used. And so it's kind of doing that stopgap before the person has to make that decision to drive to that regional hospital or to the rural hospital, where that's some of the areas where we've had some concern with delay of getting people finding out, do they have it, do they not have it, and also calming their fears and explaining to folks what the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act is, and also emergency paid emergency FMLA, all of that, because there was a concern of, well, I don't have the sick days, I really can't afford, and so they were forthcoming. And I spent a lot of time, assuring folks, and even without communication sent out, that was really important. And so, but using the telehealth option is another great example that I think is helpful. That there was some change put in place, and then events force it over.
I'm really curious, you guys. I want to hear some examples of roadblocks that you've come across and just what you've done to get past those, especially in regards to using HR as an engine of change.
Some of the roadblocks that I've encountered, throughout the years is, I think it's really important when you're implementing change to sort of identify the people in your organization that have influence, and who those people are. And I think one of the roadblocks is it's really hard to figure out who those people are. That's a big thing. But I think it's a challenge. It can be a roadblock if you can't bring around somebody who does have influence. It's going to make your job a whole lot harder. On obviously more on a micro level, but still, if it's a key department, you're gonna have problems because while departments may in your organization, maybe departments might be siloed. That doesn't mean everybody works in a silo. Okay, that means all of the different departments are independent on each other, and the strength of your chain is as strong as its weakest link. If you have people in influence in that department, or people who are influencers, and they can be from rank and file employees to the department leaders. So if you can't get them on board with it, it just makes the change and implementing the change initiative just so much more difficult.
Yeah, you're dead on with that. And one else I had my note was, the roadblock is always, like I said, mentioned there in the earlier point, is fear. It's that fear of the unknown, the mentality of, the thought, well, there's insecurity. What I've got here is mine, and I can do this, and I can do my job, and everything's going to be fine, and you're going to take that away from me. And now what am I here for? Folks, that thought process comes into play. And, there's, why my department's not broken, so why are you trying to fix it, kind of thing. Just look at the bigger picture. Those key people, those influencers, some of them are not always your upper level employee, upper level C-suite level, but buy-in does help there. In a perfect, correct world, that the buy-in should already be at that level, and then it trickles down, but that's not always the case. Especially, where there's where growing pains come into play, where there's some skepticism, and that sometimes that skepticism is non-verbally communicated especially with small to medium-sized organizations, where you have, well, that's still that first name basis with folks. But some of the influencers really getting that buy-in on folks that have been there a while, that are your kind of the company cheerleaders, and it's also helping to have the folks that you're almost your antagonists there that just sit there and that question things. It's good to have that, a little bit of that to kind of question, making sure that not everything that the organization is doing is a pipe dream. And so where HR comes into play is bringing those folks together and having a serious conversation, and help being on that team and letting them be a part of the process, because regardless what kind of structure you have in an organization, leadership always rises to the top just by traits. Some people are better at some things than others. Those folks are the ones who are influencers, not on by title, but and allow them to, once that buy-in is in play, and allow them for the folks who basically follow around or who are influenced by them, move that process. And a good byproduct of that is some cases it's not always within the same department, so there is some de-siloing there, if that's even a word. But it's where where you can, there's some cross communication where it's like, hey, this is going to work. It's going to make our job better. It's going to take the one mundane function or functions that I hate about my job and make it go away. Mm-hmm. And let's just be honest here. Outside of our world, personnel and human resources is the least enjoyable part of most of the people outside of human resources. I mean, no one likes to fool with that stuff except us. We see and so if we can find ways that, hey, this is going to, so we can use it as a way to relate. And, but those roadblocks are there. It's all about buy-in, and where that buy-in is in calming fears.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like roadblocks come up a lot more too when there's a change in a company, change initiatives start to happen, and really those affect the employees the most. I mean, I know it's something that HR really has to deal with, but the change is affecting all of the employees, and sometimes I feel like it's not always that's recognized. So how do you go about, let's talk about some of the change initiatives that you two have come across, and how do you feel it affects the operations of your employees?
Well, and then, when talking about, it's overcoming when you talk about the why is this going on and things like that, I like to bring it back to that. It's, are you communicating that effectively? Are you making the why it's going on? Are you effectively communicating that to the folks that actually do the work? Nobody comes to my organization because I'm a great CHRO. They come to my organization because we have great practitioners, we have great nursing staff, we have compassionate front desk staff, and that's why they come. So
now they know you're a great CHRO. So they might come for that reason now.
Who knows? Anyway, the thing is that though, they're the folks that do the work, and they're the folks that we have to make them, or we have to try and make them see their part in this and see how this positively affects them, and be honest and transparent. Like there may be some short-term pain that comes along with this, but the reason we're doing this is because we want to make your work life a little better. We want to make, and because if your work life is a little better, you know what, you're going to take care of our patients better. And that's pretty much where, I think where that message really needs to be focused.
I agree. And I will say, I think that this is a big problem right now. There are a lot of changes, and the why doesn't get communicated all the time. And this may seem a little silly, but one that I've heard that's very common among a lot of HR professionals right now. It seems very small, but it's a great example, I think. I mean, everyone is using virtual like Zoom or Skype video communication, And just the simple request of asking all employees to turn on their cameras is something that employees don't understand. It's a change because they started out this pandemic. They just had to get on and just listen and be there. And now employers, especially HR professionals, are starting to see that it's easier to tell who's engaged, who is really a part of what's going on if the camera is on. They want to see faces. People are missing that in-person interaction. But I do feel like that's the same situation. Employees don't understand, why do I have to turn on my camera unless they're told a reason why. And that would be because you're not seeing people anymore, basically.
One thing I'm seeing with the organization I'm with is early on, I imagine all organizations were like this. We had a Zoom call for everything. Any type of question. Let's get a Zoom call together and let's get everybody in.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back in pre-COVID time. We the point of having too many meetings. And I was always kind of taught and I'm becoming more and more of a believer, if it can't get done in 30 minutes to an hour, it's not going to get done. And, meetings are meant to discuss what we're going to do, not what we need to do, kind of thing. And now with our organization, it has migrated to now, my amount of video conferencing with Zoom, Meet, whatever, is down to a fairly efficient amount minimum. That it's a little bit more, the conversation is much more efficient than what it was. Either people, for whatever reason, either they don't want to be on camera anyway, so they just want to hurry up and get it over with, or they're trying to do some other work, and then so it's good that face-to-face interaction is good, because I know when my current employer, I'm on a modified schedule, so I go in the office 2 to 3 days a week. We keep our numbers down to a certain amount, and it cuts down our ratio of people in the offices. And so when I'm in the office, there is a little bit more socializing going on than it is when I'm at home. Now, some stuff I do have to go in. I'm more productive in the office on certain tasks, but other tasks, it's worked out well. But there is it's making people turn the camera on. But I think the idea of not everyone's comfortable in front of a camera versus face to face. And in my situation, I am seeing that our meetings are much more efficient. There's less conversation going on. And it's especially when in a culture where relationships are important everywhere, and so but the relationships beyond what's work, so discussing the football game, or discussing what you did this weekend, that type of thing, is much more productive. And so from my perspective, what we're seeing when we do have these types of meetings, the use of technology, virtual technology, that it is much more just more straight to the point. And I think that's a beneficial thing.
Yeah, I've been finding with the technology, it's that the meetings you have a lot more of them, they're more frequent, but they're a lot shorter. Each individual one is a lot shorter. And I think it's really taking care of, people really focusing on using their time efficiently.
Look how much money companies have saved on not having to buy lunch for lunch meetings.
Or the ones that never did buy lunch.
I worked for an organization once where if you had a meeting anytime between, say, 11:30 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the expectation was you were supplying lunch. And if you didn't, people looked at you like you had 4 heads. You got in trouble. I was like, because when it comes to stuff like that, I am like the worst. I am like, I've always get the catering screwed up. And I am the worst. It's like when I have to plan a big party for my wife, I call up her sister and I say, okay, I want to have a party for Karen. It's okay, go ahead, do whatever you want. Just tell me how much it costs. That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Well, that's me. I'm that person. Whenever my company has a training or any type of conference or anything in person, and it runs through that middle of the day, I assume there's going to be lunch there. I just because I'm going to get hungry. So if you want me to really be with you and focus, I need some food. I need energy. But yeah, I think that is the assumption at most places. It's funny. And now they don't have that. I did a conference about a few weeks ago that was digital for the first time, a webinar. And it is one that we usually do have lunch provided. And so I asked, is there going to be food delivered to me to my place during lunchtime. Since I knew that wasn't, but
yeah.
Be nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I find that, and during this time and working from home, when it comes to you're sitting at your computer and you're churning out work and things like that, and you look up and it's 3:30 in the afternoon, and the only thing you've had to eat all day was, the 3 cups of coffee you had to jumpstart your day,
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that this is really making me think about is, sitting at home so much. Like, I am working from home every day, and it has really made me see how much I enjoy what I do. But I also feel like it's doing the opposite for some employees. This is really a time where people are either starting to realize how much they love what they do, or they're starting to realize this may not really be what I want to do at all. Or they loved it before, and now that they're home doing it, it's not what they enjoy. So I feel like it's very important right now for especially HR to find good ways to help employees learn how to value what their role is in the company. What are you guys doing as far as that, or what do you suggest?
I think it's a real challenge for us. One of the things is that because there's still, there's a lot more that we don't know about this. There is a lot more and you know what, employees, I found, like, folks at work, they like to know, like, what's going on. And I'm trying, well, so essentially what I'm trying to say is that they want to know, like, they're saying, hey, gee, well, if I can work from home, then maybe I don't need to live in New York City. Maybe I can live in, like, the suburbs, and I can get that suburban life, and I can get that, and the hustle and bustle of the city, things like that. And I don't have to worry about commuting into work anymore. And I could live like 2 hours, 3 hours outside of New York City.
I believe there's an article that was out, or study, where millennials are moving out the burbs for that very reason.
Yeah.
I'm an old, what you call it, I'm an old millennial, whatever that means, but I'm just not that cool. But the folks that are younger than me, I guess born after 84, 85 back, that have been, that got hit kind of hard out of the gate with the Great Recession somewhat, and had to stay home and save, saddle a student loan debt. They've been socking away money, with in terms, a little bit more environmental conscious. So living in cities, so there's access to public transportation. Well, now they can take that money and it's like, man, I'm going to go move out a little bit, move out in the suburbs, move out in the country. And especially where I'm at, and that's a good thing. A lot of these southern states have used a lot of that stimulus money. They are Mississippi and Louisiana, to invest in high-speed fiber internet in rural areas, and I mean rural, where there's not a house for miles in between. It's just farmland. And so there's some appeal to that to some folks. There really is. And so I live in a small bedroom community just outside of Jackson that we've had fiber for a while, but if you go about a mile down the road, it's like DSL or something. That the states are realizing that type of infrastructure is just as important than roads and bridges, which are very important themselves. But that's pushing you right. And you're right. They're questioning, why do I need to go in the office anyway? Some folks, I'll use myself as an example. I feel like I have to go to work to feel productive. Now, I have learn out of necessity. I have made myself get up, keep a schedule at home, and I imagine most Americans and most people in the world have done the same thing to keep their job. And, you made a point, Corey, about folks not feeling passionate about their job. It's unrealistic for HR people to think that everybody we hire is going to be passionate about their job. Some people are just good at it. Some people just need a job. There's nothing wrong with that. And they just like working where they're at, or they just need a paycheck. And recognize that type of thing. And basically, you're right. Stay in that communication and cater, do as much as you can to help nurture that. Because if they're good employees, a good employee is worth saving, regardless where their passion is.
Do you, and this is if this catches you off guard, it's fine. But I just thought of this. How do you feel about a change initiative that, I mean, is it something that's done where instead of interviewing or placing employees in the position that's needed, moving employees based on what position fits their personality type best? Once they're within the company, do you feel like that's a effective change initiative to move people
HR
around?
professionals have been trying to do that for decades.
What? I couldn't hear you.
HR professionals have been trying to do that forever.
Yeah.
Every personality test, every emotional IQ, of course we do. But I think in a good world, yes. I think it's a battle we'll have to keep fighting, and it's an ideal that HR and companies need to have to put you where you think you fit best. But that really needs to be, and that's as long as it's encouraging employees and also having a structure in place for cross training. Not so much, and just to see what they like. If their person's a great employee but terrible or not that great particular job, but you want to keep good people, because that is a philosophy. Instead of focusing on skills, focus on folks that have a great work ethic. I particularly take that preference of mine over. I mean, education is very important. Experience is very important, but just the willingness to learn and the willingness to listen. To me, it would almost trump a lot of that, and that's what I kind of look for. And I'm fortunate to work for an organization that has that same type of philosophy.
Good.
Yeah, in my experience, like I know, you hear people talk a lot about career ladders for your staff, career ladders, and I'm not that big a believer in that. There are some professions that have clearly defined ladders, like say, for example, you have a medical assistant, then a medical assistant can become an LPN, then an LPN can become an RN, then an RN can be maybe an RN manager, and so on and so forth, and just sort of take that nursing. But now, and you see this a lot in healthcare, is that it's more like, the way I think about it is like a career lattice. Like say, for example, you follow that path, and then you start saying to yourself, you know what? I think I can sort of run this clinical area, or I can run this. So then from that clinical role, moving into an operational role. But when an organization has those defined career ladders, it's like, and you have a person who has that desire to move into an operational role from a clinical role, or they're in an operational role and they say, you know what, I know what I do impacts the care of patients, but I really want to start taking care of patients. So they move from that operational role and they go back to school and they want to work in a clinical role. It's those two things. So if career ladders are good for folks that really have that dedication and they want to stay with what they're doing and what they're comfortable with and things like that. But we also have to give people a way to go into another area if they do have that desire.
I couldn't agree more. We're at in our certain positions in the organization, folks on our boat. So at Deckhand, there is a level of program that we call our steersman program, in which folks that Deckhand that show promise and all that can move up to a steersman, to a mate pilot, and on up to a captain. And and it's an investment on the company's part. It's a commitment on theirs, and it is structured. But it's one of those things where that's there for that type of. It works for some industries and some types of positions, and not others. In all honesty, if an HR department's doing its job, in my opinion, the manager should be having that conversation with that individual fairly frequently, at least twice, 3, 4, 5 times a year, once a week. And what I'm getting at is retention of a great employee, of a good employee, a good person who wants to exuberate the philosophy of the company. Where, man, I want to keep this person here. I mean, let's be honest. In some cases, I'm just throwing this number out here. If you can get an employee to stay 3 to 5 years, that's pretty decent. But if you can, especially the younger they are, the shorter that's going to get. So the idea is, what can we do to basically reinvent this company to that individual, and not reinvent themselves, but where would you like to pivot to or move to in 3 to 5 years, and and what skills do you need to have to move to that? That is really about buy-in from a management standpoint. HR is a very important role in that. Are not the owners and should not be the owners of that, but of that type of mentality. But of looking, okay, you're doing well, you're out to take on more responsibility, more pay, whatever it is for this to move up to a senior level, whatever you are, or let's cross train and then pivot to see if you are in other areas, if that makes you interesting, because we want a person like you working for us in the long haul. We want, that's foresee that you're going to be that person that we go to as an influencer in the organization. But you got to keep it interesting. Some folks just like doing what they're doing, and that's okay. It's good to have people like that. It's also good to have folks that kind of move it up a little bit, because then, 10, 15, 20 years from now, they could almost, move if the company hits a snag and has to lean up and wear a lot of hats. That person can be the one that wears one of those, several hats.
Well, speaking about several hats, from what I've experienced, HR wears a lot of hats, a lot, and not always ones that really fall under HR, but they're just they end up falling on the shoulders of HR. And kind of to what you were saying, Alan, helping managers in helping their employees. You really are the guidance for the managers, not so much should you be doing what the manager should be doing. And I feel like that happens for a lot of HR professionals. Sometimes they end up just kind of doing instead of being that guidance. How do you guys suggest, or are there ways to make this change and kind of set yourself out there that you're more of the guidance than just doing everything that needs to be done?
Yeah, I actually address it on an employee's first day in orientation. I say, when we talk about, what the HR department does and things like that, what I talk to them is this, chances are you may have an issue that, you're going to call up HR and you're going to say, listen, my boss is mean, my boss is this, my boss is that, or whatever. And I'm going to, and you're going to expect me to say to you, okay, I'll speak to your boss. And then I hang up the phone. And then I speak to your boss. That's what you're going to expect me to do. And I said, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to do that. I said, what I am going to do is I am going to help you have that conversation with your boss to discuss the issue that you have. And what I will do is I will focus on having that boss listen to you as you're telling them what your issue is. Because if I say, okay, I'm going to talk to your boss for you, and I hang up the phone and then I speak to your boss, I've solved that issue right there, right now. But what I have not done is anything that is going to improve your relationship with your boss and your boss's relationship with you on an ongoing basis. And that's what you need to do. I expect my managers, when an employee has an issue, I expect my managers, we train our managers to listen to what they have to say. You have to listen to what they have to say, because while you may think that it's not really that important an issue or whatever, that issue is important to at least one person. That's the person who's bringing it to you. And as far as that person is concerned, it's the most important issue going on in the world at that time, in that snapshot of time. And that's why you need to listen to your staff. And then I say to them, now you got to understand another thing is that you almost have like an inalienable right to be listened to when it comes to your issue. You don't have the right to the yes. So there's a lot of times when you bring an issue to your boss and your boss is going to say, nah, I can't do that. Now, what I expect is that your boss is going to say, nah, I can't do that, but gives you the reason why not. And it's not a because I said, or because, it's going to be a real reason. Okay, but that's what I expect. And I'm here to help you have the best employment experience that you possibly can. I don't see how I'm helping you do that by taking your issues and making them mine to fix for you.
I agree.
Yeah.
To build on that a little bit, we spend a great deal of our lives at work. That or sleeping. I mean, let's just be honest. It's that or sleeping. By the time we retire or are able to retire, you unless you just got to a profession that you're able to do that, you're already kind of past your prime anyway to really enjoy it. I mean, it's still enjoyment. But, what I will say, though, is there's some areas, though, that obviously where an employee just doesn't feel comfortable going to his manager, though.
Yeah.
Now, define that. Now, in terms of job performance or in terms of just a coworker or just I always push that back. And you I imagine most folks that will listen to this can know there's always that, I would say handful, but there's those group of employees that will always, them better than anybody, that will come straight to you for everything. I give, when I travel to other sites, I give my business card to other employees and all that. And it's like, you call my cell. My cell number's on there. And, I'll get a call on a Sunday night and there's, a couple, or Saturday morning for a couple employees who just want to talk. But I feel, look, that's what it's for. I would have handed it to them if they want to, but it's most of the time they don't have a problem. They just want to chat and talk about work, and I'm trying to follow protocol. But it is a Saturday morning. I'd rather be doing anything but that. But that's my job, and that's what I got to do. But there's some cases though where an employee may not feel comfortable talking, and it may be a personal issue.
Yeah.
So define it. It's really important that we're not going to make it go away. If there's obviously a benefit issue. Their managers don't want to fool with that anyway. And it's a hard time, but I really do not like handing employees a phone number to call. I've had to do it because I can only do so much because I feel that takes away the one-on-one connection that we have. And so that is going straight to HR to try to fix something. But when it comes to actually dealing with folks and also go back to this organizational change, when there's a new policy being implemented down or a new philosophy, you got a new manager is in itself as a change in that organization in that area. It's good practice to always push that unless there's some sort of inappropriate language or some sort of or something that because people do have a right to go to work and not have to be feel uncomfortable all the time. And of course, it varies in terms of from environment and in an industry of that sort. But I was going to say, take it's some things employees should feel comfortable coming straight to us. We might not be able to fix it, but at least listen. Mm-hmm. And that does builds equity with the HR department with buying on other people. And we're always have, because look, unless we are a human resource department is a huge organization, we do not generate revenue. I mean, we're not a profit center. No. I mean, we're probably one of the biggest parts of expenses, of costs. So now in some areas we can, if we have a training that if an organization has a certain training set up where we can outsource our training and make money off of that, but that's few and far between. I've heard of them. I've been a part of some of that. It's awesome, but it's realistically the average human HR department is the part that it does not on the front end at face value does not generate revenue for the company, but it can also cause the organization to lose money in other areas outside of HR if it's not done properly. And it's in that weird world. But so in order for us to have any leverage with an equity within management, within executive level, it's important to get that where employees feel comfortable coming to us. And I think that's another place where we can help move that change along and say, hey, yeah, this stinks. This is what's going on, but in the long run, this is where we're going to be. Mm-hmm. And encourage those employees to say, hey, if you see something wrong, man, it's your job to say something. Right. That's what we want you to do your job, but but always suggestions. We may not always take them, but keep that dialogue going with your manager. So yeah, I think there's most cases definitely, but in some cases, that's an opportunity for HR departments to build equity among its employees. That's not at a management level.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Corey. It's fine.
I wanted to just share an experience that's happened to me that I actually feel like happens to a lot of younger employees. So right straight out of college, I worked for a very large corporation, and I ended up having a manager that I felt was just did not speak appropriately to our team, raised their voice, not professional language, and it really made me uncomfortable. It made me feel like I couldn't do my job the way I should, and it really made me hate coming to work. And to be honest, I don't feel like I'm the only one that this happens to as a new employee, a younger employee, especially someone who hasn't had a lot of working experience. I didn't even really know what HR was or what they did, and I had absolutely no clue that that was a department or someone that I could go to and explain that situation, and it would stay private. I really figured that out later on after I left, and it was a little, it was a little disappointing because I wish I had been told that right from the get-go when I started, that that's what HR is there for. And I don't feel like people know that when they're new employees a lot of times. Do you find that happens with younger or just new employees sometimes?
Yeah, I do. And they don't know necessarily when to come to HR, when not to come to HR. And I know that can be, and that because the idea needs to be in an organization, I think, is that if an employee comes to HR, that employee cannot be, and then the employee cannot be made to feel like, why'd you go to HR for? Why didn't you just come to me? And I said, well, because you talked to me like that. And that's why I had to go to HR. But that's one thing. And then, and something that we actually had, I've had issues in the past where, the people in authority talking so disrespectfully to other people is that where, the employee would cry. And I mean, not like, the lower lip, welling up a little bit. I mean, full out bawling, dry heaving cry. And I was explaining this to somebody once, and the individual said to me, well, Ken, you got to understand, the person never really had any mentorship when it came to a leadership position and things like that. I said, hold it, wait a second. I said, that's not a problem of mentoring. That's a problem of parenting. Okay, if you're talking to people where you make them cry, that's not a mentorship issue. That's a parentship issue. All right.
There's not a workshop for that you could do on a Thursday. It's that's some basic human, some basic decency there.
Yeah, it is.
But what's funny about that, we joke, is that is used often sometimes for inappropriate behavior. Or we were not trained as such, or were you raised in a cave beforehand, and that's but you have to, and honestly it's sad to say, it's almost job security for HR people, because you have to deal with stuff like that all the time. And I would prefer to deal with a lot of other things besides that, but that is used sadly and that's where HR department has to make that stand, and that's common decency is you exhibit it when we hired you exhibit it for most of the time, that you've been here, so we know you know better, and it's not a lack of leadership training or mentoring or any of that, so.
Agreed. I agree. Well, I really appreciate you guys coming on the podcast today of Resourceful Humans. You were both great, and I learned a lot, honestly, because I was throwing questions at you that have never come up before. So I thought it was great, and hopefully you'll come back again. And if anyone has further questions for you and wants to chat, they can definitely find your profile in LinkedIn in the comments below and in the posts, and they can reach out. But I really hope everyone writes their comments and feedback or questions in the comments so that you can interact with them and answer their questions. So thank you, guys.
No, thank you very much. This was excellent. Alan, great meeting you, and I really enjoyed our talking. So
Thank you, Corey. This is great. And Ken, it's a pleasure. This was fun. I want to do it again. Yeah, it's all right.